Hi everyone, this is Steve with the Hurricane Tracker app. Today is Tuesday, May the 28th of 2013, and we're going to go ahead and do our first video update of this upcoming hurricane season for the Atlantic Basin, which begins on June the 1st. And we do have a system out here in the Eastern Pacific we'd like to start with today. This system here off of southern Mexico has about a 90% chance of developing, and I think it's going to develop into a tropical depression or a tropical storm at best. So really the main impact here across southern Mexico is just going to be the heavy rains as it slowly meanders here to the northeast here over the next 3 to 4 days before it fizzles out here over the very southern portion of the Mexican mainland. At this point, we're not too concerned about a low-level center crossing Mexico and entering into the southern Bay of Campeche. That is a slight possibility, but right now I don't think that's going to happen. What may happen is some of this moisture may move up across Mexico and get ejected into the Western Caribbean Sea, where some of the computer models are showing development here next week, somewhere here in the southern Gulf of Mexico or the Western Caribbean Sea. And we'll be taking a look at that possibility here in more depth in just a moment. There's another system out here with a 10% chance of development. It's just going to keep pushing to the west and fizzle out, so I'm not worried about that system at all out there in the central eastern Pacific Basin. Here's the computer model for the system down here over Mexico. I'll just go ahead and run it real quick here for you. And you can see the low-level center as initialized by the model down here. And if we just go ahead and put this into motion, you'll see the system is just going to move inland and just basically fizzle out. Like I said, heavy rainfall is going to be the main threat with that system there in Mexico. Now here in the western Atlantic, taking a look at the Caribbean Sea satellite imagery, this is a big change. First of all, we can see the tropical disturbance becoming better organized here over southern Mexico. But there's also now a lot more moisture being developing here in the western Caribbean Sea and also throughout the Florida Straits. Again, we think this area here, or possibly even the southern Bay of Campeche, will be a likely spot for development for our first Atlantic system as we get into next week. The first computer model I want to take a look at is going to be the GFS model. This is the American model. And around the middle of next week, it begins to develop a low-level center down here in the very extreme southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. We call this the Bay of Campeche. And it takes a few days for it to really start to organize, but once it starts to organize, I'll put the model here a couple more days in advance, and it starts to develop the low pressure area a little bit better, and the convection becomes a little bit more defined. And what it does is it moves this system towards the northeast, towards the Florida Peninsula, or possibly even the Florida Panhandle. So if you live along the Florida Panhandle or over the Florida Peninsula, towards the early to middle part of next week, you want to keep an eye out down in this region, as it looks like there is a good chance, although not a definite chance, there is a decent chance that we could have a system develop down here. And this is being supported by several of the computer models. This next model is the European model, one of the more favorable and more accurate models over the last several hurricane seasons. And as you can see, it does develop a low-level center down here in the southern Gulf of Mexico. And just like with the GFS, this also moves this low pressure area off towards the east-northeast or the northeast towards southern Florida. One more model, the Canadian model, just for kicks here. This model it's not as accurate as the first two I just showed you, but it is a decent model to look at. And you want to kind of make sure all the models are showing the same thing before putting out a forecast of a developing cyclone. But you can see here over near Apalachicola, it does develop a very weak tropical cyclone at best. But still, what's important from this model is that it is showing development just like the other two are. So once again, sometime middle part of next week, about 7 to 10 days from now, we will be looking down here in the southern Gulf of Mexico, possibly even the Western Caribbean, for something to take shape and organize, and then move northeast towards Florida. Whether it's going to be southern Florida or the Florida Peninsula or Panhandle, we just won't know. That's too far out to know for sure. And again, this is not a guarantee it's going to develop. It's just a good possibility at this point. And of course, we'll be here at the Hurricane Tracker app to keep all of you updated. In case you haven't seen, the NOAA has released their official forecast. This is their forecast here in the middle of this graphic. Then over here on the right side is the normal. Normally we see about 12 tropical storms. This year they're forecasting 13 to 20. 6 hurricanes is what's typical. This year we could see up to 11 hurricanes. And normally each season we see about 3 major hurricanes, and we could actually see about 3 to 6 major hurricanes category 3 or higher this season. And they're basically stating that with all the factors involved this season, we could see an above average or an extremely above average season. And one of the graphics I like to show from their press release is several of the expected conditions that look like they may come together to produce an active hurricane season. One is we already have warmer than average water temperatures out here in the Atlantic Ocean. The pressure is higher in the upper atmosphere. That also favors tropical cyclone development. And we're also going to likely see a wetter African monsoon over the easterly trade winds. And that does bring these African tropical waves here into the eastern Atlantic, and they tend to develop here in the intertropical convergence zone. This area hasn't been all that favorable for developing cyclones over the last few seasons, but this year it looks like that could be one of the major pattern changes. And we also have reduced wind shear and lower air pressure. So all of these conditions you see on this map will likely come together to produce an active hurricane season. Now, where these systems would go and make landfall, that is impossible to predict at this point. Over the past few seasons, we've seen a lot of storms curve out near Bermuda or curve out to sea just off of the eastern United States seaboard. This year, I think some of the storms would follow basically through this cone here, kind of pointing more towards Florida and the southeastern United States, and possibly even into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So again, keep in mind this is just a forecast with all the information they have available. It does look like it's going to be an extremely active hurricane season. And I'd say right now we've got about a 30 to 40, maybe even a 50% chance of seeing a tropical depression or a weak tropical storm develop somewhere in the southern Gulf of Mexico or western Caribbean Sea next week. I don't think the conditions are favorable for it to become a hurricane at some point. So wherever it moves, it's going to bring a lot of moisture, a lot of rainfall. Some of that is needed over the Florida Peninsula. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But you folks in Florida, keep an eye out to the southern Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea in the middle of next week. And again, we'll be here with frequent video and audio updates, and also updates on our Facebook group, which you can access inside the application, as well as our Twitter feed. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a great day, everybody. Appreciate it.